What if I told you that the most beautiful, calm, and comfortable spot on the entire lake is exactly where you are guaranteed to catch absolutely nothing? You know the spot I am talking about. The water is as smooth as glass, the breeze is gently pushing against your back, and your casts are flying a country mile. It feels like fishing paradise. But here is the brutal truth that most guys learn the hard way. You are fishing in a complete ghost town. Today we are talking about why fishing the upwind shore is the absolute biggest mistake you can make when the wind is howling. I'm going to show you exactly why all the fish have packed up their bags and moved to the most miserable, choppy, and windy side of the lake. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will completely change how you look at the weather, and you will understand why you have been going home empty-handed on those breezy days. So let me ask you right now before we get into it, do you naturally walk to the calm side of the lake to avoid the wind? Be honest, drop a comment down below and let me know if you have been falling for this trap. Let us talk about why this happens and why so many guys repeat this exact same mistake for decades. Fishing in the wind is incredibly annoying. It bows your line, it makes bite detection almost impossible, and if you are using a bait caster, you are constantly terrified of getting a massive bird nest. It is human nature to seek out comfort. We want to be warm, we want our gear to work perfectly, and we want to enjoy our time by the water. So, generations of grandfathers have told us to go find a nice, quiet cove out of the wind. We pull up to the lake, look at the whitecaps crashing on the far bank, and we immediately turn our backs to it. We set up our chairs or anchor the boat on the calm shore, thinking we have outsmarted the weather. But we are completely forgetting that fish do not care about human comfort. They do not care if your line is bowed or if your hands are cold. They operate on survival, and they operate on the food chain. By choosing the comfortable shore, you are literally choosing to fish in a spot where the food chain has completely collapsed for the day. You are casting into a dead zone. Picture this scenario for a second. It is an early Saturday morning, and you finally have a day off to hit the water. You pull your truck up to the local lake, step outside, and the wind is absolutely howling right in your face. So, what do you naturally do? You grab your gear and take a long walk down to the sheltered side of the lake. You find that nice, quiet bank where the wind is completely blocked by the tall trees. The water right in front of you is perfectly smooth. It feels incredibly peaceful, and the wind is safely at your back. Because the wind is behind you, you can cast your favorite lure an absolute mile out into the open water. You are standing there, feeling like a professional tournament angler, as your bait just flies effortlessly through the air. You wait for that familiar heavy thump on the end of your line, but 10 minutes pass, then 30 minutes pass. Before you know it, 2 full hours have gone by, and you have not had a single bite. You start changing colors, you start changing baits, and you wonder if the fish are just totally shut down today. But the reality is much harsher. The fish are not shut down at all. The brutal truth is that the fish are actually feeding heavily right at that very moment. You are just standing in an absolute biological desert. You let the calm water trick you into fishing a dead zone. Let us talk about why that calm water is completely dead today. It all comes back to the absolute most basic rule of nature and the underwater food chain. When you are standing on that upwind shore, enjoying the gentle breeze on your back, you are completely ignoring the massive mechanical force happening right under the surface. Water is incredibly heavy, and it takes a tremendous amount of energy to move it around. But when a steady wind blows across a lake, it actually pushes the entire top layer of water forward. It acts exactly like a giant, invisible conveyor belt, dragging the surface layer from your side of the lake all the way to the complete opposite side. You might not see it happening, but the currents under the surface are shifting dramatically. This invisible conveyor belt is the key to everything in fishing. If you do not understand where this water is going, you will never understand where the fish are hiding. Now, think about what actually lives in that top layer of water that is being pushed away. You have millions and millions of tiny, microscopic organisms called zooplankton. These tiny creatures are the foundational building blocks of the entire lake ecosystem. But here is the catch. Plankton are absolutely terrible swimmers. They have zero ability to fight the current created by the wind, so they just get helplessly swept along for the ride. As the wind blows for hours or even for a few days, almost all the plankton in the entire lake gets pushed far away from your calm shore. It all gets piled up on the windy, nasty shore across the lake. You as a fisherman might not care about microscopic plankton, but I guarantee you that the small baitfish care deeply. Minnows, shad, and small bluegill spend their entire lives chasing this microscopic food. They do not care about a calm surface. They care about eating. So, when the plankton gets blown across the lake, the massive schools of baitfish have absolutely no choice but to pack up and follow the food across the open water. Once those massive schools of baitfish make the journey across the lake, they run into a very chaotic situation on the downwind shore. The waves are crashing violently against the rocks, the water is turbulent, and these tiny fish are getting tossed around like cheap clothes in a heavy washing machine. They become incredibly disoriented. They struggle to swim straight, and they get pinned against the rocks, the mud banks, or the thick shoreline grass. They are essentially trapped by the relentless force of the wind pushing against them. They cannot easily swim back out into the calm, open main lake, because the heavy wind current is constantly pushing them back into the shallows. It is a terrible and exhausting situation for the small baitfish, but it is an absolute dream scenario for the big predator fish. Bass, walleye, and big northern pike are lazy by nature, but they are incredibly smart hunters. They know exactly what the wind does to their prey. They set up shop right in the middle of that turbulent water and just wait for the confused baitfish to be delivered right to their mouths. This invisible conveyor belt of water does not just move the tiny food, it completely changes the entire physical environment of the lake for that specific day. When the surface water gets pushed to the far side, something has to step up to fill the void it leaves behind on your calm side. So colder, oxygen-poor water from the deep bottom gets pulled right up to the surface on the calm upwind shore. This is scientifically known as an upwelling. It makes the water on your comfortable side noticeably cooler and far less active for the fish. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the lake, all that sun-warmed surface water is constantly stacking up. It creates a thick layer of warm, highly oxygenated water pushing right up against the muddy banks. If you were a fish, would you really rather sit in the cold, dead water where there is absolutely no food? Or would you swim across the lake to sit in the warm, oxygen-rich water where a massive all-you-can-eat buffet is currently being served? The answer is incredibly obvious when you think about it from the perspective of a hungry predator. Let us talk about the illusion of the perfect cast on the calm side. You are standing there on the bank, making these beautiful, long, completely effortless casts with the wind at your back. You are admiring your distance, thinking that covering more water will eventually result in a massive bite. But casting long distances into an empty swimming pool does not catch fish. The clarity of the water on the calm side is also working heavily against you. Because the wind is blowing away from the shore, the water right in front of you is completely clear and undisturbed. That means the few fish that might actually still be lingering in the area have perfect vision. They can see your shadow on the bank. They can see your thick fishing line floating on the surface. They have all the time in the world to slowly inspect your artificial lure and realize it is a piece of plastic. Clear, calm water makes predator fish extremely cautious and very hard to catch. You are essentially trying to trick a highly suspicious animal in broad daylight with zero natural cover to help hide your mistakes. Now, let us imagine you take my advice and you walk around the lake to the miserable, choppy downwind shore. The wind is howling directly into your face. The waves are relentlessly crashing onto the rocks right at your feet. The water looks like absolute chocolate milk. This dirty water is called a mudline, and it is arguably the greatest natural advantage you can ever have as a fisherman. When those waves crash onto the shallow bank, they churn up the sand, the dirt, and the mud from the bottom. This creates a thick band of cloudy water right along the shoreline. Predator fish absolutely love a good mudline. They use it as a tactical ambush zone. They will sit right on the edge of the murky water, hiding in the shadows, waiting for a confused minnow to get pushed out of the waves. When a baitfish gets tumbling through that dirty water, the bass does not even have time to think. It just opens its mouth and reacts. The mudline forces the fish to bite purely out of aggressive instinct instead of careful visual inspection. That muddy, turbulent water provides another massive advantage for you. It acts as perfect camouflage for the angler. The choppy surface completely breaks up the sunlight entering the water. The fish cannot clearly see you standing on the bank, waving your rod around. The dirty water also hides your fishing line and masks any unnatural movements of your lure. You can get away with using much heavier line, which is a lifesaver when you are pulling big fish out of rocks and heavy cover. You do not have to worry about using delicate, ultra-thin fluorocarbon leaders that break constantly. You can tie on straight, heavy braid and winch those fish right up onto the bank. The wind and the waves create a chaotic environment, and in chaos, the predator fish let their guard down. They are purely focused on eating the disoriented baitfish that are getting slammed against the rocks. When you throw your lure right into the middle of that chaos, the fish hit it with a level of violence that you will never ever experience on the calm, peaceful side of the lake. But let us be completely honest about casting into the wind. It is an absolutely miserable experience. Your line blows all over the place, forming a giant bow in the air. If you are using a bait casting reel, you are constantly fighting the brakes to avoid picking out a massive bird nest of tangled line. It is cold, it is wet, and it takes a lot of physical effort to punch a cast straight into a 20-mile-per-hour gust. This is the exact reason why 90% of fishermen avoid it. But comfort does not put fish on the bank. If you want to catch the biggest fish in the lake, you have to embrace the miserable conditions. You have to learn how to adjust your technique. You cannot just stand up tall and throw a high, looping cast into the sky. The wind will grab your lure and throw it right back at your feet. You have to keep your rod tip low to the water. You need to use a sharp sidearm casting motion to punch the bait low under the wind. It takes practice, but once you master the low trajectory cast, the wind becomes your best friend. Choosing the right lures for these heavy wind conditions is absolutely critical. You cannot walk over to the choppy side of the lake and try to throw a lightweight, finesse worm with a tiny piece of lead. The wind will completely ruin your presentation, and you will never even feel the bottom. When you are fishing the downwind shore, you need heavy, aggressive, moving baits. This is the time to tie on a heavy spinnerbait with big willow blades that flash in the turbulent water. The heavy lead head cuts right through the wind on your cast, and the spinning blades create massive vibration that the fish can easily feel even in the muddy water. A heavy vibrating jig or a loudly rattling crankbait are also incredible choices. These baits are designed to cause a huge commotion in the water. Remember, the fish are sitting in a chaotic, noisy environment. The waves are crashing, the rocks are tumbling, and the mud is swirling. Your lure needs to be loud and obnoxious, just to get noticed in all that heavy underwater traffic. When you are throwing those heavy moving baits, your retrieve technique has to adapt to the wind as well. If you hold your fishing rod up high while you reel, the wind will grab the exposed line between the rod tip and the water. It creates a massive parachute effect, pulling your lure off its natural path and completely killing your ability to feel a bite. The secret is to keep your rod tip pointed directly down at the water surface, sometimes even dipping the tip an inch under the water. This keeps your line tight and direct, cutting out the wind interference entirely. When a big bass slams that spinnerbait in the mudline, you will feel the violent shock travel straight up the tight line into your hands. There is no guessing if it was a rock or a weed. The bites in this situation are incredibly aggressive because the fish are competing with each other for limited food in a highly concentrated area. They do not nibble, they destroy the bait. Now, we have to talk about the timing of the wind, because not all wind is created equal. If the lake has been perfectly calm all morning and a heavy breeze suddenly starts blowing out of the north, the fish are not going to instantly teleport across the lake. It takes time for that invisible conveyor belt to move the plankton and the baitfish. It might take 2 or 3 hours of steady wind before the baitfish begin to stack up on the downwind shore. So, if the wind just shifted 10 minutes ago, you might still catch a few lingering fish on the calm side. But if the wind has been blowing steadily in the exact same direction for 12 hours, or even worse for 3 days straight, you can guarantee that the upwind shore is completely empty. The longer the wind blows in one consistent direction, the more heavily concentrated the fish become on the opposite bank. Paying attention to the weather report for the days leading up to your fishing trip is just as important as checking the weather on the actual morning you launch. Let me paint a picture of a situation I see almost every single weekend at my local lake. There is always that one old, grizzled fisherman sitting on a white bucket, right in the teeth of the wind. He is wearing a heavy jacket, the waves are splashing his boots, and he looks like he is absolutely miserable. Meanwhile, there are 3 younger guys with thousands of dollars of fancy gear, standing on the calm, beautiful shore, laughing and drinking coffee. If you sit and watch for an hour, you will notice something incredible. The old guy in the nasty weather is constantly reaching for his net. He is catching fish after fish, pulling heavy bass and walleye out of the muddy water. The young guys on the calm shore are just practicing their casting. They never get a single bite. That old fisherman does not have a magic lure, and he does not have better luck. He just has 30 years of experience telling him that the wind dictates everything. He knows that the bait fish are trapped at his feet, and he is fully willing to suffer the cold wind to reap the massive rewards. A huge psychological barrier that stops people from fishing the windy side is the fear of ruining their expensive gear. We have all experienced the absolute nightmare of a terrible backlash on a baitcasting reel. One gust of wind hits your lure mid-flight, the spool overruns, and suddenly you are spending 45 minutes picking at a massive knot of expensive braided line while the fish are biting. It is frustrating enough to make a grown man want to snap his fishing rod in half. But the solution is incredibly simple. Do not be stubborn. Just tighten down the brakes on your reel. Yes, you will lose a little bit of casting distance, but in this scenario, casting distance does not matter at all. The fish are not sitting 60 yards out in the deep water. They are pushed right up against the shallow bank, hiding in the mudline literally 20 feet in front of your boots. You do not need to bomb a cast to the horizon. You just need to make short, controlled, accurate pitches into the turbulent water. If you are fishing from a boat, everything we just talked about is still 100% true, but boat control becomes your biggest challenge. Trying to hold a lightweight aluminium boat in position while a strong breeze is smashing against the hull is a nightmare. This is exactly why shallow water anchors and advanced trolling motors were invented. But if you do not have that expensive technology, you have to use the wind to your advantage. Do not fight the wind. Position your boat upwind of the shoreline you want to fish, point the nose of the boat into the wind for better control, and let the breeze slowly push you along the bank. You cast ahead of the boat and let the trolling motor just maintain your angle. The absolute worst thing you can do in a boat is try to anchor on the calm side just to save your battery. Your battery will last all day, but your live well will remain completely empty. You have to commit to boat control if you want to catch the active fish. Safety is the one major exception to this entire rule, and we absolutely have to mention it. Fishing the wind is smart, but risking your life for a fish is incredibly stupid. If you are in a small boat and the wind is blowing 30 miles per hour, creating dangerous white caps and massive rolling swells, do not try to cross the open lake just to fish the windy shore. Boats flip, people fall in, and cold water is deadly. In extreme weather, survival trumps catching fish. But this is exactly why bank fishing is sometimes the absolute best way to fish on a terrible weather day. When you are standing firmly on solid ground, the wind cannot sink you. You can walk right into the teeth of the worst storm, stand on the rocks, and fish the most chaotic water safely. Some of my biggest catches have come while standing on a muddy bank during a heavy rainstorm, with the wind trying to blow my hat off. The fish do not know it is raining. They just know the dinner bell is ringing loud and clear. Let us talk about the specific transition zones that get created on the windy side. The entire windy shore is generally good, but there are always sweet spots that hold the absolute giant fish. Look for points of land that stick out into the crashing waves. As the water pushes past these rocky points, it creates powerful underwater eddies and current seams. The biggest, most dominant predator fish in the lake will claim these current seams. They sit in the calmer eddy, hiding behind a large rock, and watch the fast water blow the baitfish right past their faces. When you find one of these rocky points on the downwind shore, you have found the absolute jackpot. You can literally stand in one spot and pull a dozen big fish out from behind the exact same rock. Another massive sweet spot is where the mud line meets the clear water. If you cast your bait into the clear water and slowly drag it across the boundary line into the muddy water, you will almost always get a reaction strike right on the edge. The temperature difference is another massive factor, especially in the early spring and late fall. When the water is cold, fish become incredibly sluggish. They will seek out any pocket of slightly warmer water they can find just to get their metabolism going. As we discussed earlier, the wind pushes the sun-warmed surface water across the lake. During a sunny spring afternoon, the downwind shore can easily be 3 to 5 degrees warmer than the calm upwind shore. 5 degrees might not sound like much to a human wearing a jacket, but to a cold-blooded animal, it is the difference between being completely frozen and actively hunting. I have seen days where the calm side of the lake was completely dead, but the choppy, windy side was stacked with aggressive fish, simply because the water was a few degrees warmer. You have to stop thinking like a human and start thinking like a biological machine that reacts to temperature, current, and the availability of easy calories. It really comes down to breaking your old habits. We are creatures of habit. We go to the same lake, we park in the exact same spot, and we walk down the same familiar trail to our favorite casting rock. We do this regardless of what the weather is doing. This is exactly why some guys swear that the lake has no fish in it. They refuse to adapt. If your favorite spot happens to be on the calm side of the lake today, you have to be willing to turn around, get back in your truck, and drive to the opposite side. It feels wrong to leave a beautiful, calm cove to go stand in the mud and the wind. Your brain will tell you it is a bad idea. Your frozen fingers will tell you it is a mistake. But the moment you feel that heavy thump on your spinnerbait and you set the hook into a massive fish that is fighting for its life in the choppy water, you will instantly understand the power of the wind. You will never look at a calm, glassy shoreline the same way ever again. So, the next time you wake up early, grab your coffee, and pull up to your favorite local fishing spot, I want you to completely ignore the water right in front of you. Take a step back and look up at the tall trees. Watch the branches. See exactly which direction the leaves are blowing. Figure out where the wind is pushing the surface water. Once you know that direction, you know exactly where the invisible conveyor belt is delivering all the food. Turn your back on the comfortable, easy water. Walk your gear all the way around to the choppy, noisy, muddy side of the lake. Put the heavy wind directly in your face. Tie on a heavy, noisy lure that causes a massive commotion in the water. Keep your rod tip low, fire that bait right into the crashing waves, and hold on tight. It is going to be uncomfortable, it is going to be messy, but it is going to be the most productive day of fishing you have had all year. Comfort is the enemy of a great fisherman. Let us quickly recap the biggest lesson here today. When you fish the calm, upwind shore with the breeze at your back, you are casting into a dead zone because the wind has blown all the plankton and baitfish away from you. The biggest plot twist in all of fishing is that the worse the weather feels to you, the better it actually is for the bass and walleye. The heavy wind pushes the food, traps the baitfish against the opposite shore, creates a muddy ambush line, and masks your presence on the bank. If you can embrace the misery of casting straight into a howling breeze, you will completely change your approach and start catching the biggest fish in the lake while everyone else gets skunked in the calm coves. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out today. If this video helped you realize why you have been struggling on windy days, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and do not forget to leave a comment down below. Let me know, what is the worst wind you have ever fished in, and did you actually catch anything? Let us get a great discussion going down in the comments.